Dynasty Nerds on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back. It's Thursday night, so you know what that means. It's the Dynasty Nerds. It's the Better Sports Network. The best combination, bringing you all the goodness in your fantasy football world. My name is Garret Price. I am your host for the next 2 hours. I'm your pilot. I'm your driver. I am, whatever you want to call it. We're here, and I cannot wait to get into the show tonight. Look at that. Sedated Fork already in. Thursday. That's right. It's the new best week of the best day of the week. Look, once the season starts, you got Thursday night games. Your NFL season, your NFL week kicks off on Thursday nights. The draft starts Thursday nights. The award show, guess what night it is? Thursday nights. When you have things like major golf tournaments, when does that start? Thursdays. I'm just saying, NCAA tournament, March Madness, one of the most exciting sports weekends of the entire year. When does it start? Thursdays. That's what I'm saying. Thursday night, it's the place to be. Infinite possibilities here. Stephen F's here. He said he even made it on time. Look at this guy. Look, I even got the new little Dynasty Nerds sign back here. Looking pretty slick, right? It looks fuzzy, but it's because it's a blurred background. That's how it works. All right, we have an awesome show planned for tonight. Around 10:15, like always, Dennis Bennett's going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about all of this training camp news, and we're going to be talking about the top 5 most underrated running backs. So I'm excited to have Dennis on, but any moment, literally as soon as I say the word, our man Tyler Soto is going to be joining us. Now, if you're not familiar, you should be, because he's here literally every single week. That's right. Every single week, because he is the producer for this show. Now, last week we did a fun little thing, which I don't know how well it worked on the air. I don't know. It was the Immaculate Grid. I thought, how fun would this be to do live on the air and talk it over with everybody? The thing I did not factor in is how terrible I am at multitasking. So trying to have a show, not have dead air, but also try to go to the recesses of my brain and think of super obscure players, especially at positions, typically, not always, but at positions that I don't cover as much. For fantasy football, it's quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver. That's what we cover. So I didn't get to do that. And so when we did that last week, I struggled a little bit, maybe embarrassed myself a little bit live on the air. But Tyler hopped in and he kind of showed us what was up. He crushed it. So he is back again this week, and we're going to be talking about the biggest storylines going into the 2023 season. I'm really excited about, because there's some nuggets here that I think are going to be really interesting things to follow as the year goes on. So Michael Anthony, happy Thursday to you, my man. Infinite Possibilities saying, I hear Aaron Rodgers restructured his contract. Does that mean Dalvin Cook or Devontae Adams are going to the Jets? And Steven said maybe both. I think the Cook one is really interesting. It could be unfortunate for Bryce Hall, because I still think, unlike some of those other guys that don't have jobs yet, I think he's the one that still has some juice left, and that really could cut into Bryce Hall. Maybe it's also an indicator that maybe he's not quite ready to start the season, which would be a bummer, because it sounds like Javonte is, and it sounds like Javonte's injury was potentially worse than Bryce Hall's. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. Richie said, I'm worried about Dalvin Cook going to the Jets for me being a Hall owner. So I get it, man. I get it. I'm with you. So at this point, why don't we bring in my boy, Tyler Soto, Heavy T. Tyler, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good, man. Can't complain.
Look, you crushed it last week with us with this Immaculate Grid. And look at you. You're right back this week.
Yeah, wasn't planning on being back this week, but it just happened like that. So again, can't complain, man.
Sometimes it just works out that way. But we're gonna talk about the biggest storylines going into 2023. And I'll be honest, I had thought about this before, because you and I had talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
One of mine changed today. I changed one of mine.
I think I know which one it's going to be.
Do you? Because there's a couple it could be, but you probably do know. You probably do know. So, Tyler, give me your first storyline that you think is going to be one of the top storylines. And maybe when we're all said and done, we'll pick like our top 5 overall that we can think of. And feel free in the chat. Now, we might have these written down as ours already, but feel free in the chat to tell us your favorite storylines as well. We'll throw them up on the screen when we can. But Tyler, give me your first one you think is the biggest storyline or one of the biggest storylines for 2023.
So I have a bunch to choose from, but
Okay.
I think if you notice the helmets over here,
I wondered if Falcons were going to play a part of this.
So the Falcons will play a part, not just yet, but they will play a part.
Okay.
The other helmet, though, is from when I lived in Houston for 2 years and I helped cover the Texans for a bit. But I think that's a really good story going into the season. You have the new look Texans. They just hired DeMeco Ryans. You get a new quarterback. You have some new pieces at the wide receiver core. It's a whole new breath of fresh air, like new life in the building in Houston, right? So you draft CJ Stroud. You bring Tank Dell with him per his request. John Mechie, I believe this morning, was just cleared to come back.
Yep.
So you have that. You bring in Dalton Schultz, who I think is one of the more underrated tight ends in the league. You bring in Devin Singletary at running back to kind of help that position out. And then you have one guy in the wide receiver core who I think has a really good chance to bust out for a really sleeper season, and it's Nico Collins. So my reasoning for this, so I looked at the numbers a little bit. So he's played 2 years, 2021, 446 yards, a touchdown. 2022, 481 yards, 2 touchdowns. You look at that and you're thinking, okay, well, what makes you think he's going to break out? Because he's finally going to have some consistency. The consistency is he had 2 different head coaches in those 2 years. He had David Culley and he had Lovie Smith. He had 2 different offensive coordinators in Tim Kelly and Pep Hamilton. He had 2 different quarterbacks. He had Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills. He's finally getting 1 OC, 1 head coach, 1 quarterback. Something to just be stable on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And Jaws, real quick, I have not heard anything new on Burrow. We'll have to wait and see. But that is obviously huge news if he's going to miss any sort of real time. But no, I think that's a good one. And tied to that is arguably one of the biggest stories from the past couple of years. This is their first, not their first season, but they're now rid of Deshaun Watson, who, they're now going to always be comparing all of those draft picks that were traded for him are now always going to be, we're going to see it in a graphic. They traded Deshaun Watson for this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And that'll either be really good or really bad, depending on how well they draft and how well all that plays out. So you're right. I do think that the Houston team is definitely a big story for this season. And we'll see how they do in this AFC South, which is a weird division. The Jaguars probably overperformed last year, but we thought that they would be kind of a playoff team maybe this year, not last year. So do they continue to build on that or not? The Colts, they have Richardson. So what point are they at? The Titans, we thought they might be going into a rebuild, but they're not. So it's like the whole division's interesting. So the Texans could quietly make some noise if everything. I'm not projecting them to win the division or anything like that.
Oh,
don't get me wrong.
No.
They'll probably be a bottom 5 team again, more than likely. But it is one to just keep in mind.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think their win over or their win loss total was, I think 4.5. I believe it was. I'd pick them to go over. Honestly, I think they're a lot better than 4.5. I think they're probably
division,
closer to.
I could see it.
Yeah, I think they're closer to 7.
That could be true.
Yeah,
that could be true.
7-1 team. Yeah, because now you have all these new guys, and you want to play well for the new coach. So that's what it is.
All right, so I had already kind of had this one in the back of my mind as like a potential one. But I was like, is it one of the biggest storylines? Is it not one of the biggest storylines? I don't know. But then with his comments today, it automatically catapulted this up towards the top storylines for me for 2023. And that's this Denver Broncos team. You had a team that had so much hype last year. so much hype with Russell Wilson going there. They made that big move because they thought they were just a quarterback away. And then everyone got injured. Russell stunk for the most part. Geno Smith outperformed him. Like, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Hackett's gone after 1 year. And then they bring in a borderline legendary head coach in Sean Payton. I mean, the dude is a great head coach. He's won a Super Bowl. He has great offensive prowess. And then today he makes these comments about Nathaniel Hackett last year, what a terrible job he did managing, and he just threw more gasoline on this fire. So I think watching what happens with Sean Payton, Russell Wilson, and this offense in 2023 is a huge storyline.
Yeah, I mean, the comments kind of came out of nowhere. It's like,
yeah,
no one was really talking about it, and then I woke up this morning and it's like Sean Payton is talking massive crap on the Jets, and I'm just like, what happened? Like, did I miss something? And yeah, no, so I believe they play each other week 5. And I was telling my buddies this game needs to be flexed to either Sunday or Monday Night Football immediately, because I believe right now it's slated as the afternoon CBS game. It's like, no, this needs to be played at night.
Everybody
national
watching.
Audience, yeah, everybody needs to see this. Like, I'm actually I think the Jets end up going far. I don't know how far, but I think they end up going far. I actually did put him in the AFC title game.
Okay.
The Broncos, on the other hand, I think they can do well, but it's all going to come down to Wilson. Like, they have the defense. They have the pieces there on offense. It's really going to be Wilson whether or not it makes or breaks it.
Yeah.
That's my honest opinion. Because, like, and I know Sean Payton well enough because I saw him all those years in the Falcons division, the NFC South with New Orleans. This dude, while he had Drew Brees, yes, he will pull you and bench you if you do not play well. And I'm trying to remember who the backup was. Oh, yeah, it's Ben DiNucci, I believe, is one of the Broncos backups. This dude will pick up Ben DiNucci and throw him in the middle of the game. Does not matter. So I'm really interested to see how Russell Wilson does.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. And I'm gonna go a little out of turn because you brought up one of my other biggest storylines for 2023, and I think it's the Jets. I think first of all, they're on Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
Second of all, Aaron Rodgers is now following the Brett Favre footsteps, going from the longtime Packers quarterback to being the Jets starting quarterback. And I think they're going to be pretty good. Like, I think this is going to be a pretty good team. So how much does Aaron Rodgers have left in the tank? Does he mentor or not mentor the MILF lover and Zach Wilson? Like, I think it's going to be an absolute circus. And honestly, one of my favorite players in fantasy football, Garrett Wilson, is on this team. So that makes it even more fun. Then you got Sauce Gardner with, his jeweler and all that stuff. Like, it's a fun team to talk about. Hard Knocks you see it every year. Whatever team is on Hard Knocks, those players end up getting drafted higher than other players. Like, it just boosts the national interest of it. So I think the Jets are a huge storyline for 23.
I agree. I would also pay actual money, in which case I'd have to because I'd have to fly out there. But I would pay actual money to just see Wilson and Gardner just go one-on-one constantly in practice.
Oh,
like, that's got to be a sight to see. You have one of the best young corners versus one of the best young receivers on the same team, about the same age, drafted the same year, and these dudes are just going, and they're both number one in their respective position on the team. So they're just going head-to-head. Like, I need footage of this, and I'm sure there is on Twitter if I really look, but I need footage of this every single day because this has to be a massive matchup. And then you have the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. Is this dude just going to start doing shrooms in the middle of Hard Knocks? Probably, if we're honest. So it's a whole thing. You're 100% correct. Yeah. And then, I mean, the Zach Wilson thing is interesting because they could, in all honesty, they could trade him in the middle of the season. Say they feel like, hey, we're one defensive piece away, or so-and-so got hurt, we need to replace him. Let's just give him Zach Wilson. We really don't need him more because we have Aaron Rodgers, who restructured his deal, so he's going to be there at least the second year. Right. So it is a really solid storyline. And I'm going to be honest, I was going to save this one probably for last, but I think because you mentioned the Jets,
okay,
now I have to bring it up now.
Do it.
So just literally go to the other locker room, because my second storyline is, can Daniel Jones and the Giants continue to move upwards and ascend. So you have last year, they actually go to the playoffs. Brian Dable turns everything around. So you look at Daniel Jones in 2021, went 4-7, 64.3 completion percentage, under 2,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, 7 picks, 41.5 QBR. Then 22, Dable gets there, goes 9-6-1, 67.2% completion percentage, 3,205 yards, 15 touchdowns, only 5 picks, which is impressive, 92.5 QBR. Everything's on the up and up. On top of that, Saquon Barkley had an amazing comeback year last year, 295 rushing attempts, just over 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, 4.4 yards per carry, and he can catch. He had 57 receptions. He had 5.9 yards per catch. And then on top of that, they bring in Darren Waller.
Right.
Who
it's big.
Not last year because he got hurt, but the year before actually had a pretty decent season. Now, last year, he only played 9 games. He started 6 of them. He had only 28 receptions, 388 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had his lowest yards per game since 2018. But his catch rate was still really good, 65.1%. And he had 13.9 yards per reception. So you throw all this in the mix, and then you have Brian Dable still at the helm. Yeah. I think some people expect Jones to regress. I'm not saying he ascends farther, but I think all he has to really do is just be a game manager, and I think they still go to the playoffs.
Well, we saw him run the football a lot more than he did in the past.
Yeah, he does that.
He did, and that made their offense go a lot more than I think people realize, because his passing numbers were fine, but they were nothing spectacular. It was because of what he did on the ground that really opened up a lot of other things. But you're right. You bring up Darren Waller, and Daniel Jones had nobody to throw the ball to last year. Everybody got hurt, and even the ones that got hurt really weren't that good in the first place. So, honestly, the wide receiver room is still a little bit of a mess. They drafted Jalen Hyatt, who he was the Belindikoff winner. So you have like a mini storyline in there as well, a Belindikoff guy. But Darren Waller, can he get back to that level he was at a couple years ago? This is like too early for this, but I always do the Dynasty Nerds. We do a bold prediction show. And my bold prediction this year is that one of them is going to be that Darren Waller is a top 3 tight end for fantasy points again this year. Like, it's been a while since he's been there, but who else are you going to throw the football to? Like, I think he is going to consistently be open. I think he's got the size mismatch. Like, so I don't hate the Giants as a storyline at all. We'll see what Dable does, but I think they could take that next step this coming year.
Yeah, and then don't forget that Dable just brings in Cole Beasley, who is his guy. So that'll help a little bit. And that dude always seems to get open. Right now, their top 3 receivers, it's Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, and Paris Campbell. That's got to be like bottom 10 in the league. That's gross. Okay.
It might be bottom 5.
Yes. So you're totally right on the Darren Waller thing. Just if he can stay healthy, that's the big thing. I remember I was so pissed because I drafted him in fantasy last year, thinking that he was going to have his good year. And by week 3, I was like, this was a disaster. I don't know why I did this. But yeah, hopefully he can pick it back up. But I think the Giants, I don't think they're ready to take over Philly just yet in that division. I think they could still beat Washington because Washington's a giant question mark. But I think I can kind of put them on par with Dallas.
I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that. I think Dallas is a good team, and I think Micah Parsons has really done a lot for that defense to make it a much more feared unit than it used to be. But I think they seem like kind of like a stars and scrubs kind of team. Like, they've got some really good players, but they still have like a decent amount of holes. And so I think that's the hard part, is like, do the stars make up for the holes? Whereas the Giants, outside of receiver, I don't think they really have any other like major holes, but they don't have as many stars. It's like Saquon Barkley, and that's kind of it. Like, they don't really have a lot. I mean, Thibodeau maybe can become that guy, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. As far as Dallas goes, I think one of their holes is at head coach. I don't like Mike McCarthy, and I never have. Yeah. So, but you know how Jerry Jones is with his head coaches. He'll keep him forever until they literally drive the team into the ground. I mean, just look at Jason Garrett.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
all right. So I got one that's kind of like, this is kind of outside the box a little bit. So like hang with me on this one, because
okay.
it's a story that's not a story, but it could be again. I think that we are not done, because it's not a story yet, but I think it could be. I don't think we're done with all of this gambling stuff. I think we're going to have, because we already had the Jameson Williams, and then we had some players from the Colts. I think that there could still be more to this, because the league seems to really be cracking down on a lot of this kind of stuff. We had Calvin Ridley a couple years ago, obviously, as well. I think that this could end up still being a story. I wonder how many guys have been doing this and been doing it for a while, whether it was actually on their phone or they get their buddy's phone to do it. I think the league is really trying to clean this up. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point somebody's fantasy team gets wrecked because one of their better players is just suspended now because of this gambling stuff. Because I don't know. And like I said, so that's why I feel like I'm kind of cheating, because we don't know of anyone right now. Like, we don't know of any stories for sure, or anything like that right now. But it wouldn't surprise me with how much they seem to be cracking down on this if we don't have a couple more casualties before the season's over. I don't know. Am I reaching too much on that one?
No, I don't think so, because you got to remember when the Calvin Ridley thing broke, that was a huge deal. Yeah. And he was a superstar wide receiver. So I think it's only a matter of time until someone does eventually get caught. And for their bigger stars, the NFL might be like, hey, look, we caught you. We're going to give you a warning. Don't do it again. Right. And then there's probably going to be some dude who probably does it again. And it's funny you mention this, because the NFL is really tapping into the whole gambling thing, because my buddy literally just sent me this tweet earlier. The first ever officially licensed NFL themed slot machines will be hitting Las Vegas on the Strip later this year. You cannot be doing these things and just not expect your employees, because that's what the players are at the end of the day. They're employees of the NFL. You cannot expect them to not participate in this. They're going to want to do it. And I believe the rule currently is that you can't bet on any professional sport at all. I think they need to tweak that. You can bet on any professional sport other than NFL. Yeah, other than NFL and probably college football, just in case.
That's fair.
I mean, yeah, because these guys still go to their colleges and everything. They might know a couple things. So they got to do something, because you can't keep cracking down and saying, oh, don't gamble, and then bring out an NFL themed slot machine for all the fans to play out. Like, you can't do that. So I think weird. It still is very much a story.
It is weird how much they've started to embrace gambling, DraftKings, like all of this kind. Like, they've really embraced it. And to be fair, they're making a butt ton of money because of gambling. Like, they're making so much. Like, to be honest, you could argue the sole purpose of Red Zone is for gamblers. Like, whether that's in the fantasy football realm or in the straight up gambling realm, like, those are the two groups that are watching that. The casual fan is rooting for their team. They don't care who else scored touchdowns. It's the people that play fantasy football and the people that gamble that want to do that. So they basically created an entire network for people that gamble and play fantasy football, which fantasy football in and of itself, in a sense, is a form of gambling. So they've embraced it for a long time. It's just interesting now that it's now on a more formal level.
Yeah, I think you have something there, because I think it definitely initially started out for the fantasy football lovers. And then on top of that, only about 5 years ago is when DFS took everyone by storm, and it just came out, and it's gambling for fantasy football. That's what it is. And then it's a slope, and you go down and down and down. And now we're at we're actually betting on games thing. So I think they probably intended it to be fantasy football, but then all this stuff happened, and now we're doing it for gambling. So it just kind of, turned into a whole thing, man. It's kind of wild. But okay, so my next story, because you brought up the gambling and because I mentioned him, it actually is going to be Jacksonville and Calvin Ridley. He's basically their shiny new toy. So 2020, the year before he gets hurt, okay, 90 receptions with Atlanta, almost 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns, 62.9% catch rate, 91.6 yards per game. The dude was a fantasy monster in 2020 in a COVID season. 2021 only plays 5 games, 31 receptions, 281 yards, 2 touchdowns, 56.2% catch rate, so that drops a little bit, and then 56 yards a game, but he's playing hurt. Okay. So you throw that with all the pieces that Jacksonville has. Throw that with second-year Doug Peterson, second year under Peterson, Trevor Lawrence. Last year, 9-8. They went on that massive win streak to basically get to the playoffs. 66.3 completion percentage, over 4,000 yards, 25-8 TD to interception ratio, 54.5 QBR. That could be a little bit better. But especially when you look at the division they're in, it's Tennessee, it's Houston, it's Indianapolis. Indy's probably, they're kind of like half in a rebuild, probably maybe 3/4 in it. Houston is full on rebuilding. Tennessee should probably rebuild. It's Jacksonville's decision to lose. But here's the thing too. So they have that massive comeback against the Chargers in the wildcard round. And they actually, I remember sitting at a bar watching the game. They pretty much took Kansas City to the limit. Like, Kansas City was eventually going to win that game, but they played really well in Arrowhead, on the road, in the cold. I think this team ends up going pretty far, and I think it's a solid story to watch.
Absolutely. They're a fun team. And, as much as it hurts me as a Buckeye fan, the storyline of like how bad things were under Urban Meyer, is still going to propel this for a while. I think they're going to keep referencing Trevor Lawrence's first year and how bad it was. And, was that him? Was that Urban Meyer? And I think last year we saw pretty clearly that was Urban Meyer. He looked pretty darn good, especially towards the end of the year. Northland Vineyard saying, Harrah's you pronounce it, Entertainment and NFL have been paid partners for 3 years. So that's a casino. So I didn't even know that. That's
I know it well because there's a White Castle in there that I frequent when I'm in Vegas.
Oh, see, White Castle is like a bad word in my house. I took my girls to White Castle one time just to see, because we didn't have any near us for like a long time. So I was like, let's try and whatever. And they looked at it and they're like, why is this meat so thin and gray? And they took one bite and they're like, I don't like this. I don't like this. So now I threaten to take them to White Castle all the time. I'm like, no, don't do it. But then they love Taco Bell, which is just as bad. So I don't get it.
Yeah, it's probably the Mexican food equivalent of whatever White Castle is to burgers. So
exactly,
it's the same thing. Oh man, that's hilarious, dude. But yeah,
sorry, got off track. But yes, the Jaguars. The Jaguars are a really interesting story because they feel a lot like the Bills were a couple years ago. They've got this young, up and coming franchise quarterback. The coach is somebody that people believe in. The team around it is starting to finally come together. The question is, are they going to be able to do what the Bills have not done yet and really get over the hump and represent the AFC in the Super Bowl or not? I think that's going to be the question, but they kind of feel like they're on a similar trajectory as that team right now. And even they did the same thing with the Bills did. They went out and traded for, a veteran receiver that has a lead upside, but maybe it's not fully been realized yet. Stephon Diggs and Calvin Ridley. So it's I see a lot of parallels between those two franchises.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. Watch us in 2 years get Jacksonville Buffalo AFC title game. That's going to end up being one of those teams going. And it really could happen, especially like I said, with Jacksonville being in that division too. It's literally their division to lose.
Yeah. Sedated Fork says his storyline is the Titans. Great coach, great running back. They added Hopkins. I think they have a good shot at winning that division. Everyone is excited for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which we were just talking about, but sleeping on the Titans. I could see the Titans going one of two ways. They were not one of the ones I put down, but it makes sense because you could argue that they upset the Jaguars and win the division. And I would be like, I could see that. Mike Vrabel's a really good coach. He always gets more out of his players than they probably have at other places. So I think it's in the realm of possibility. You could tell me that they are going into week week 6 at 1-4 and looking to just trade Derrick Henry and tear everything down from the studs. And I would say, like, I could see that happening too. So, like, the realm of outcomes is, I think, very vast for the Tennessee Titans this year.
Yeah, I think they're probably a little bit closer to the tearing it down side, only because I think Tannehill's on his last legs. I don't know if Will Levis is going to end up being the guy, and I don't think Malik Willis is the guy.
No.
So, yeah, they have a massive quarterback question mark, especially if Tannehill comes out in the first 3 games and plays awful. And that's going to be an interesting one to see.
Yeah, it'll be a really interesting one. Okay. One for me, and this is another one I think that has been a influence similar to, the Hard Knock situation. This one I think has been influenced a little bit by the show Quarterback, but I think Kirk Cousins in his final year potentially in Minnesota, you saw the behind the scenes stuff. And look, my family, we loved Kirk Cousins in the documentary. We loved seeing him pray with his kids and stuff. Like, we loved that. Like, it was awesome. And I think, but a lot of NFL fans really just saw like how tough he is. I think that was the big thing that a lot of people walked away with. Like, this dude was hurt like most of the year, and he was just gutting it out regardless of how much pain he was in. And it seemed like a pretty fair amount, but he has this narrative tied to him, and in some senses it's fair. Like, he just hasn't been able to win the big games when his team has needed him to. And yes, he's had some awesome comebacks and some big plays, and like all of that stuff is true, but he just hasn't been able to win when they've needed him to. And this is his last year under contract. So what is going to happen after this season with the Minnesota Vikings? Do they re-sign him? Do they franchise tag him? Do they let him walk? There's a lot of possibilities here. So I think Kirk Cousins and what happens with this Minnesota Vikings team, I think, is a pretty big storyline.
Yeah. First off, if you don't like Kirk Cousins, go watch Quarterback, but specifically the Bills-Vikings game, and then tell me after that you still don't like Kirk Cousins. Like,
right?
There's no way. I gained so much respect for that dude, especially after that game where the dude's just getting ripped apart every single play, and he still goes in. And credit to Justin Jefferson for an amazing catch.
Oh, it was an incredible catch.
Yeah, but they go and they win the game, and it was also a wild ending to that game too, with the fumble,
with the fumble in the end zone, that was nuts.
Yeah, but Kirk Cousins as a whole, that will be an interesting one. For one thing, I know people put a lot of weight on the win-loss record of a quarterback this year. I don't think, especially if it's more losses than wins, I don't think I can entirely say it's his fault, because the Vikings defense is not that good.
No,
I think they're
not.
pretty below average. So I could see it where this dude just ends up having to get in shootouts every single game. They just
traded one of their best defensive players to Cleveland for a 5th-round pick.
Exactly. And they haven't done anything to improve it whatsoever. It's got so many holes in it. So I could see them easily. I don't think they'll be as bad as Chicago. I think, honestly, my hot take is that I think Green Bay ends up in #1 pick contention. That's a hot take that I have for later down the road.
That's interesting because I think that is a big storyline too, is the whole Jordan Love thing. The guy that replaces the legend. That's a big story.
That was going to be one of my backup stories if you picked one of mine. So, we'll see. I think you still have 1 or 2 left, so we'll see if that happens. But yeah, I think Kirk Cousins. I don't think it's going to be really fair to put the win-loss record entirely on him this season. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. If you're the Vikings, I think you keep him because you don't really have any other options. They're not going to be bad enough to get Caleb Williams. I don't know if they're going to be bad enough to even get maybe a top 10 pick in the draft where you can really get one of those good quarterbacks. So at that point, I think they just probably re-sign him, maybe not fully guarantee his entire contract, but probably re-sign him and just keep him on. But I think that's a really good storyline going into the year.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, give me your next one.
All right, so we'll go to the AFC, and we'll go to Boston, New England area, because is Mac Jones done? Is he done in New England?
That was my backup one.
Okay, cool. So it worked out perfectly.
It did.
Everything worked out. So you look at 2021, his first year as a starter, the rookie year, 10-7, 67.6 completion percentage, just over 3,800 yards by literally 1 yard, 3,801. 22 touchdowns to 30 interceptions, 50.9 QBR. Now, last year, he goes 6-8, did miss 3 games, but everything completely regressed. 65.2 completion percentage, just under 3,000 yards, 14 touchdowns to 11 picks, 36.2 QBR. On top of that, you have Bailey Zappi, who I personally like. He only played 4 games. Yeah, he started 2 of them, 70.7% completions, 781 yards, 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. That could be worked on a little bit. And it's a small sample size, but 34.5 QBR. But if Mac Jones doesn't pick it up, Belichick is one of those dudes, again, like Sean Payton. If you don't play, he will pull you. And as if we see, he will cut you. I don't know if it would go that far to where he would just straight cut Mac Jones in the middle of the season, because that would be kind of unprecedented. Right. But I think this is really going to be one of the 2 quarterbacks from that draft class, because I still think that Justin Fields is the other one. He's going to be one of the guys where, like, if you don't get it done this year, we're moving on and we're getting someone else. And the Patriots are also in that same weird position that Minnesota is in, where I don't think they're going to be bad enough for Caleb Williams. Honestly, they probably get a draft pick that's somewhere in the middle, like 12 to 17, something like that. I don't know if you're getting a solid rookie quarterback at that draft position. Probably not. So they're in a whole thing. I don't think they end up making the playoffs. I think they probably just miss. But yeah, is Mac Jones, is he still going to be the guy?
And I don't know if, this kind of ties into it. I don't know how much Belichick does or does not care about this, but Tom Brady left and won a Super Bowl, and he hasn't been close since Brady left. Like, at what point does that start to just completely eat at him, that his legacy is season by season slowly being tarnished? Each year he's not making the playoffs, not a Super Bowl caliber team, because you're right. I don't think that this team is going to have a good enough pick in order to be able to get one of these elite quarterbacks, because he does such a freaking good job with that defense that they stay in games that they probably have no business staying in, because they do such a good job on defense. So no, the Patriots, I think, are a really interesting one. And I'm not sure that Mac Jones is the guy. He strikes me as a game manager, which is nothing wrong with that. But at this point, the Patriots are not a good enough team, especially on the offensive side, to just have a game manager at quarterback. They need somebody to carry them on offense. And Mac Jones just is not that guy that can do that. So,
yeah. And I think part of it is that the receiving core is not great. And that is Bill Belichick's fault. That is 100% his fault. And their tight end core is okay. Their running back core. Now, if they get Dalvin Cook, that helps a little bit.
Sure.
But until then, it's okay. It's probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. And maybe Belichick will take extra time with Mac Jones, because he does remind him of young Tom Brady. Because when Tom Brady first started, he was definitely a game manager. It wasn't until that 3rd or 4th year that he really kind of took off. But yeah, they have some interesting questions over there at the quarterback spot.
For sure. All right. My last one is, look, I'm a sucker for dynasties. I'm a sucker for trying to see how good these good players can really be. And I want to see what happens with Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid and this Kansas City Chiefs team. I do. I want to see them become the next dynasty. And I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm a Browns fan. But I want to see them become the next dynasty. Because, look, the NFL is at its best when you have a team to root against. And when teams get to that point where they start becoming like the Yankees were at one point, like the Cowboys were at one point, like the Lakers were at one point, like, it's so fun to root for the underdog to dethrone the Kings. And I think the Chiefs are the closest team that we have right now that have a shot at being a dynasty, because of how good Patrick Mahomes is and how well he does in Andy Reid's offense. They got rid of their best offensive weapon in Tyreek Hill last year. Teams were talking about How do you recover? How do you replace a guy like that? They're like, easy. We don't, because we don't need to, because we're that good. Like, they didn't have anyone to replace him, and they still won the Super Bowl and was still one of the best offenses in football. Now you get, Sky Moore in his second year, Kadarius Toney in his second year with the team, if he can ever freaking stay healthy. So everything's coming together, and I think that we could be seeing the beginning stages of the next great dynasty in football.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that Travis Kelce just doesn't get hurt.
No,
that dude either has just absolute luck or super high pain tolerance, or honestly, probably a combination of both.
Probably both. Yep.
I think if you get rid of Tyreek Hill like they did last year, and Travis Kelce gets hurt, I don't even know if they make it to the Super Bowl. Honestly, probably not.
Probably not.
If they
because
get
Mahomes
to that,
was hurt too. Like, he wasn't playing
Exactly. If they get to that AFC title game, I think Cincinnati ends up winning again, and taking over. So that is a good one. I am personally rooting for the underdog in that one.
It's always fun to root for the underdog.
Yeah, I really like that everything for the most part that the Chargers are doing over there in LA. I mean, you just signed Herbert to that fat extension. Yeah. So you have that. Quentin Johnston, he's been throwing balls to him a lot during training camp, and Johnston looks like, hey, this guy might be the real deal. Then you have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams if they can stay healthy. And they have actually a pretty solid defense.
They do.
Staley at the head coach, I'm not the biggest fan of him. So that's the giant question mark, and that's probably what's going to end up holding them back. But I like it from the underdog side, because I do want to see them get dethroned. I do want to see them lose.
It is always more fun when there's that dominant team and you get to root for them to just get knocked off. Like, that's why that's sports are at their best when the Lakers are good, when the Yankees are good, when because you hate them so much. And now that Brady's gone, there's really not that team to be like, screw those guys. Like, like that team doesn't exist right now. And so I think the Chiefs have the best chance to become that type of team.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I completely agree with the Brady thing too, because when he's with New England, you're rooting for everyone that they played in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
You were rooting for Philly. You were rooting for Carolina. Atlanta. You were rooting for trying to think who else they beat. And it's
Giants.
Well, they played Giants, but the Giants won.
Giants won.
But you're rooting for all those teams to beat them. So I get it. And that's going to tie in slightly to my last story, because the one team that had a chance and failed is the Falcons, my personal favorite team. It breaks my heart every time I think about it. So, but it is an interest. The Falcons are also a very interesting storyline going into the new season, mainly because they revamped the defense. But the thing that no one's really talking about is, because they revamped the defense, will this finally ease pressure on the offense that Matt Ryan had to basically shoot out everybody every single week because the defense was so bad? Obviously, he's gone. Mariota didn't work, as we saw on quarterback. That was infuriating. So that didn't work out. So now you have Desmond Ridder. Okay. So before I get into Ridder, you have the key defensive additions. You bring in Jesse Bates. You bring in Calais Campbell. You bring in Bud Dupree. You bring in Caden Ellis. Like, these guys can play ball. Yep. Ellis and Campbell can actually get to the quarterback and have some sacks, okay? Campbell is also going to be a great veteran presence just in the locker room in general, right? So on top of that, you have Kyle Pitts coming back. Drake London is healthy. He's coming back. Bijan Robinson, if he's at least half of what I hope he is, they're going to have a really dominant offense. And then you have Desmond Ridder playing starting 4 games last year. 63.5 completion percentage. He went 2-2. 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They'll let him throw the ball more, 49.8 QBR. Only thing that slightly concerns me about him is that in 4 games, he did have 3 fumbles, which is not the best stat. But on that note, if he fails, they have one of the better backups in the league in Taylor Heineke. So This team actually is built to win. They're built to run the ball and win these games the way Arthur Smith did with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill in Atlanta. And now that they actually have a decent defense, I personally think that this NFC South is their division to lose.
I mean, it is arguably the most wide open division in football this year. You have the Saints where they're a mess. They brought in Derek Carr. Maybe that's a stabilizing presence, maybe not. But they keep trying to extend their window, and I don't think they've realized that their window it closed a little while ago, but they keep like trying to extend it. Obviously the Panthers, no position to win at all this year. Yeah. And Tampa Bay is a really interesting one because they still have a lot of the pieces that won a Super Bowl a couple years ago, but they're missing the biggest one in Tom Brady, and now they have Baker Mayfield. So it is a wide open division. Part of me and we're kind of over time, so we won't have a ton of time to talk about this, but I'm curious your thoughts, because part of me is totally on board with you, because I love the Falcons offense. The pieces that they have are these young, sexy fantasy options that are just absolutely a blast. But would they almost be better off if they didn't do well this year? If they had one more year to get Drake May, to get Caleb Williams, to get, somebody like that, like, would it almost be better for them to be in the NFC East instead of the Commanders and have to go against Dallas and Philly and the Giants? Like, would that almost be better for them long term?
I'm not gonna lie, I have definitely thought about that. It almost, it's kind of tricky, because I think the way the offense is set up now, and I can't believe I'm actually going to admit this, is more tailored to what Arthur Smith would want. I'm not saying that Caleb Williams doesn't fit the Arthur Smith
he can fit any system. Offense. He's a stud.
Yeah, he could fit any offense, but Arthur Smith is going to more run the ball. That's his thing, as we figured out. Caleb Williams, he can run too, but he's more known as a passing quarterback, which, don't get me wrong, would be great, but I don't know if it would 100% fit with what they're doing here. Now, I think if this was 2016 and Kyle Shanahan was still the offensive coordinator, absolutely. I'd hope we'd be awful and get Caleb Williams. But I think at this point, this is finally Smith's team, because they had to deal with all the cap hits because of Julio Jones, because of Matt Ryan. This is finally the team that he can put together. And because of that, I actually hope that they do well. If they make the playoffs, I don't know if they win the wild card game. I would hope so. I don't know if they go past the division. I think the division is where they stop.
Yeah.
But I think they finally have something that they can actually build a future on.
Well, and if you're going to do it with a young up-and-coming team, much easier to do it in the NFC than it will be in the AFC this year, for sure. A lot of the best teams are in the AFC. So,
and
all right, Tyler.
If Ritter sucks, just get Kirk Cousins, baby. Just
Kirk Cousins, baby. I low-key wanted Lamar Jackson to go to Atlanta so bad.
I'm not gonna lie, I did too. But that was another one of my backup storylines, to see how is Baltimore gonna do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But it ended up working out in the end. I'll take Ritter, and we'll see what we got.
I'm a Ritter guy. I'm rooting for him. He was my top quarterback pre-draft that year, bumped down to 3 after the draft, and we saw him fall a little bit, but definitely a guy I like and a guy I'm rooting for. So we'll see how that all ends up playing out. So, all right, Tyler, thank you so much for coming in and hanging out, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. It's nice to be on this side.
For a guy that's normally behind the scenes, you do pretty good at this thing.
Yeah, I think some people don't really know that about me, is that, like, my brain goes back pretty deep. So when it comes to all this stuff, I can usually pull it out. But yeah, no, this was fun, dude.
Appreciate it. We're gonna do it again for sure. Sedated Fork said he's vibing with the heavy TG Price show, so he's liking it.
Let's go.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and when we get back, I'm going to answer all of those questions that you guys have. So get all of your trade questions. I already see a few in there. I'll get to all of them right when we get back. But before we go, let me tell you real quickly about Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription. That's right. It's everything that you need for football season, and that includes the Fantasy Alarm Football Draft Guide. It's your cheat sheet, one-stop shop for dominating your drafts. And best of all, It's digital, so it's always getting updated. Look, you can pay $27 for it. Absolutely worth it. But my suggestion is, why don't you get it for free? If you sign up for a monthly or annual subscription, you will get it absolutely for free. Start your free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm All Pro and get immediate access to the draft guide. Go to fantasyalarm.com. We will be back in a moment.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Rodgers Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I'm still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that, even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
Welcome again, Dynasty Nerds. I'm your host, Garret Price. We just had my boy Tyler on. Really enjoyed him getting to talk about the biggest storylines going into the 23 season. I think we had a lot of good ones. Curious what you guys believe is the biggest storyline. So feel free to put in the chat your biggest storyline for 2023 that you are following. We've got some trade questions in here. And if you've been with the show for a while, you know we usually take 15, 20, maybe even a half hour at times to go through some of these trade questions, try to answer as many as we can, so that way we can help you dominate your league. So here's a fun one. James Manning says, Devy League. Now, I just did a show on Dynasty Nerds with my boy Jared Wackerly last week about Devy Leagues, how much I enjoy Devy Leagues. If you're not familiar with Devy Leagues, real quickly, what it is it's the opportunity to be able to have college players on your team. Now, they don't necessarily score points for you, but you can basically get them and put them on a practice squad, a taxi squad early. The reason for that is it's an opportunity to watch college football and get excited about these players before they even get to the NFL. So I love Devy Leagues. If you pay attention to college football at all, it's a great way to kind of get ahead, get some of this talent that people might not be as aware of. You can get those guys nice and early. So James Manning says, Devy League, Superflex League, start 10 PPR. Anthony Richardson or Caleb Williams. Thank you so much. Now, we actually have some sample sizes of drafts that have had both of these guys in them this year. Devy League's startups will have both of these guys in it. If a Devy / rookie draft would have both of these guys in it if it's the first year doing that as well. I've even known some leagues that are not Devy leagues, but you can draft 24 picks in advance in the startup. So that makes it really interesting as well. So, but their ADP is not super different. And I'm probably going the slightly more risky route, but I'm going Caleb Williams. Look, Anthony Richardson has a massive ceiling, an absolutely massive ceiling, and especially when you consider his athletic ability. But in college, he really was looking to throw the football. He's not just this pure runner. I think the possibility of what he could be, especially in the Steichen offense, could be awesome. I mean, remember, he was with Jalen Hurts, and he was one of the reasons Jalen Hurts became who he is today. But Caleb Williams, without the extra tutelage, coaching, all that kind of stuff, he is that guy already. Like, he is a better prospect today, still with a year left of college, than Anthony Richardson is. He would have been taken easily ahead of Anthony Richardson in this draft. He would have been the number 1 overall pick if he was eligible, not just like what would happen next year. No, like if he was eligible as a sophomore, he would have been the guy. He's a good athlete too, so he can run the football. But look, it's almost sacrilegious to say, but his game looks so much like Mahomes. He can throw off platform. You have those awkward arm angles that he can make happen. He's a guy that can run, but he's more looking to get the ball downfield. And he made so much happen last year, and he won the Heisman for a reason. Now, granted, there have been plenty of Heisman players that have been trash NFL players. So I'm not saying that if you win the Heisman, you're going to be a good NFL player. No, not necessarily. But he really looks like he has all the tools. Now, the reason I said it's more risky is we don't know what's going to happen this year. Could he hypothetically fall off a little bit? It's possible. I don't see it, but it's possible. Could he pull an Andrew Luck? And even though he was projected to be the top quarterback taken, he goes back for another season. And then, your 2 years that you could have had with Caleb Williams that you didn't have. That could happen too. But at the end of the day, give me who I believe is the best player of those two. And I do think Caleb Williams is the slightly better player. All right. Scooby Taylor, sorry. Should I trade away Trevor Lawrence and Pacheco for Kyler, Etienne / Bryce Hall in Superflex? My other QBs are Burrow, Bryce, Young, Jordan Love, Trask, and Tannehill. Thanks. All right. I would not do that. I think Trevor Lawrence is significantly better. I think he's significantly better than Kyler, and he's in a better situation. We don't know what Kyler's situation is going to be. He's either going to be stuck right now on a bad team, which granted, they throw the ball a lot, so it's not the end of the world, or he's going to be traded to an unknown destination for us. We've seen lots of injuries. And look, for me, if you're going to get an elite round 1 startup quarterback, you have to overpay. And I feel like getting Etienne or Bryce Hall, I'd probably rather Bryce, but getting Bryce Hall and Kyler for T-Law and Pacheco is a fair deal. But if you're getting the best player in the deal, one that's a round 1 startup that's only, 24 years old, 23 years old? I don't know. He's young. I need you to overpay. And I don't think I'm getting enough because I have the borderline sure thing in T-Law. Kyler is, at this point in his career, fairly far from it. So I would say I'm sticking with T-Law. All right. Steve said, I had a question about the Dynasty GM and the app. All right. I just refreshed both and noticed the values aren't equal for my teams. Doesn't matter the mode. Am I doing something wrong? I just refreshed both and noticed values aren't equal for my teams. If you could clarify that for me, because I'm not quite sure what you mean. And if I don't get to it here, shoot me a DM. Be happy to try to figure it out for you, or I'll send you over to our customer service at Dynasty Nerds, and we'll get that figured out. So, but yeah, if you can clarify, I'll try to help figure that out for you. Sedated Fork says, I have a top 4 team thinking about making a play for Calvin Ridley. I have 106, 108, and 112 in the draft. What seems fair? 108, 112, both? Or would you make a play for Keenan Allen instead? Keenan Allen, I'm not against getting Keenan Allen. I think Keenan Allen probably has another year or two, but obviously you're going to get more years out of Ridley. Now, the risk that comes with him is, as much as I think he's going to be an absolute stud, he was gone for 2 years. How much rust does he need to knock off? Is he the same guy? What kind of shape? Like, there's all kinds of question marks, but I'm not overly concerned with that. I think he is a very, very good player, a very good wide receiver. So I would be shooting for a guy like Calvin Ridley over Keenan Allen. Now, as far as what seems fair, my guess is 108 would probably be fair, because right now you're looking at the range of, in a super flex league, I'm assuming you're looking at Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, like those kind of guys right now are roughly in the same ADP range that Calvin Ridley is. So and in some cases they're higher. So I think that's a fair deal, roughly a 108. I wouldn't want to give 106 because then I'm getting JSN. I'd much rather JSN long term. So, he would have to give something pretty big back if he wants 106. But I think 108 seems pretty fair. So that's probably the route that I would go. All right. Red Sox fan says, just traded Daniel Jones, Will Levis, and Christian Watson for Anthony Richardson, Brandon Ayuk, and CEH in Superflex. Honestly, I think that's a really good deal for you. I like Daniel Jones. I think he is an underrated asset, but you're looking at somebody in Daniel Jones that has around 4-ish startup, around 5-ish like startup value. Most of the time I'm seeing him going around 4. Levis, who is pretty far down, but could turn into something, and Christian Watson. So basically Brandon Ayuk, Christian Watson, I don't think that there's much of a difference there. The difference between, Will Levis, obviously he's more valuable than CEH, but even if you were to say, I'm trading Daniel Jones and Will Levis to get Anthony Richardson, because that's more or less what it is. CEH is just kind of a throw in, and fingers crossed that he gets enough touches to be, relevant this year. But I would still probably take the Anthony Richardson, because you're basically trading like a 4th round pick and a 10th round pick to try to move up to the very, very beginning of round 2. So, and here we go. Dennis saying Jones is currently the 4-8 in Nerd Startup ADP. So, yep, exactly what we thought there. Round 4 sometimes sneaks into round 5. So, yeah, I think that's a good move. I think that's a good move. All right. Vic Chavez says, top 4 team. I traded away Javonte, which hurts my heart. I love Javonte, but if it's a good deal, it's a good deal. Traded away Javonte, Juju, and Bryce Young for Cup in a 25-second in a 1 QB 12-team league. Good deal? All right, so in a 1 QB league, obviously, Bryce Young is not very important. Like, he's being drafted as a quarterback 2. So, in a 1 QB league, he's like a mid-second round pick in rookie drafts. So, not a big deal. Juju, I'm not really expecting a lot from Juju. So, I don't really care about that. So, really, it comes down to Javonte, because, yeah. So it's basically Javonte, because you can take away Bryce Young with the 25-second. Like, that's basically what Bryce Young is worth in a 1 QB league. So it's Javonte and Juju for Cup. And if you're a contending team, as much as it hurts my heart, Cup's going to guarantee that I'm a contender this year, assuming he stays healthy. Javonte, I think, could be, but I don't know. And that's the hard part is, he's been cleared. He's not on the PUP. I feel good about that. I really do. But at the end of the day, ships are what's most important. So I would probably go. But let me know if you're a contender. If you're not a contender, then I'll go the Javonte side because Cup's old, and I'd rather, get the younger assets and Bryce Young and Javonte and guys like that. So for what it's worth. Michael Anthony, kind of referencing the last deal that we talked about, or 2 deals ago. I'm a competitive team. I traded Addison for Ridley. So he's on board getting Ridley for a guy like Jordan Addison as well. Vic Javez says, I have CMC, Barkley, Cook, Madison. Wide receivers now are Judy, Adams, Cup. Yeah, that sounds like a contending team there to me. All right. Okay, so Steve says, to clarify, my total team value on the website is $60,395, but on the same on the app, the same team is $55,874. Okay, so here's the issue. Right now, trust the app. The website is a little bit behind the app. The app is the thing that is constantly being updated. It's running on 2 different platforms, so eventually they should sync up and be exactly the same. But the app is right now, unfortunately, the more accurate. The website is not as accurate at the moment. So go to the app. So I appreciate you clarifying it. So yes, that is why you are noticing a difference. Red Sox fan says, thank you. Absolutely, man. Better Boss said, joined a new Dynasty league. That's always so much fun. Love joining new Dynasty leagues. And joined a new Dynasty league in need of a rebuild. Tried trading Mike Evans for every pick, and not until 206 did I get a taker. Moved Evans and drafted Michael Mayer. Control Michael Mayer for 4 years. Yes, that's a good deal. And is it on the surface? Like, should Evans be worth more than 206? He probably should be worth more than 206. But here's the thing. If you're in a rebuild in 2 to 3 years, Mike Evans isn't helping you. So at that point, whatever you can get is going to be worth more. And look, I like Michael Mayer. And it sounds like it's a contract league, so you get Michael Mayer for 4 years. So contracts play a role in this as well. Now, something I do like to wait for is sometimes I will wait longer to try to trade some of these veteran players because people won't value them as much in the offseason around rookie time, but their value inherently goes up as soon as games start, because then people start to see, what things are looking like on their app. Shoot, I'm projected to lose by 5. I need another receiver, or, oh crap, it's week 2 and my top receiver just went down. Who can I go out and get? So while I have no issue with that deal, I would make that deal in the same situation as well, because at the end of the day, you got to get something for these aging assets, and you got what you could get, and you got a good player that you can control for 4 years. But yeah, sometimes I like to wait a little longer to deal these veterans if I'm a rebuild, because you get more once you get to the regular season. So Vic said, thanks, love the input, and it hurt me to trade Javonte. I get it, man. I get it. Better Boss says he can't move Kyler in the same league. And at this point, you're probably better off because, look, he's not helping you win anyway. So that'll only help you get better draft capital for your picks that you currently have. Hold on to him. And then if he gets healthy and somebody wants him, then maybe you can look to make a move. But same type of situation. I would rather wait till in season when his value goes up, because right now, Kyler Murray's value has probably never been lower, not even as a rookie. Like, I think this is the lowest his value's ever been. So I'd much rather just hold at this point and just wait and see what happens. Michael Anthony says, got any hot takes for this season? Man, I've got lots of hot takes. Now, can I back them with good data? It's more from the old gut. I will have hot takes later on in the year where they will be backed up with a lot more information, data, things like that. Right now, it's more just off of feeling and more off of what I'm perceiving. I mentioned the one earlier, Darren Waller. I think he's going to have a top 3 tight end season for fantasy this year. And part of that is just he's like the only show in town. He's the only consistent pass catcher outside of Saquon Barkley that they have at this point. So Darren Waller being a top 3 tight end this year, even though he's being drafted as more like tight ends 7 to 10. I think Darren Waller will be a top 5, top 3 tight end this season. Another one, I think Bijan Robinson is the number 1 overall fantasy running back this season. Yes, it's not just because Tyler's here and he loves the Falcons. I think he will have a better season than Eckler. I think he's going to do better than CMC. I think he's going to be the number 1 overall running back for fantasy. And part of that's just going to be on pure volume. I think Arthur Smith is going to give him the ball a ridiculous amount. I think he's going to be used both in the running game and in the receiving game. Tyler says, this is making me happy. It should. Yeah, I think he's going to be the number 1 overall fantasy back. And I think we're pushing 2,000 total yards this year. So those are 2 that I've kind of had for a little bit, but don't worry, as we get closer to the season, there will be plenty more hot takes to come. All right, last one here. I'm a dumpster fire team, not just in a rebuild. He's a dumpster fire team in an orphan I just got. Non-PPR 1 QB. I traded, I'm assuming that's Tyreek and not Taysom. So Tyreek Hill and James Conner for Hawkinson, Watson, Sky Moore, a 25-second and 3rd. I think I did well on that one. So assuming it's Tyreek Hill and James Conner, yeah, I have no issue with that. I think you might have been able to get a little bit more for a guy like Tyreek Hill, but you got 2 really good upside young receivers. Now, will they both pan out? I don't know. But then you got draft capital on top of it and one of the top tight ends. So I think you could have maybe got a little bit more because it was Tyreek Hill, but getting 2 young receivers and Hawkinson is a pretty good get. So I would give that like if A+ is like, oh my gosh, you fleeced that dude. F is terrible. C is like even. I would say like a B to B+. B to B+. I think that was a good deal for you. All right. We're going to take a quick break. Before we do, I want to remind you guys one more time about the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Look, the All-Pro subscription has everything you need for the football season. Absolutely everything. This includes the Fantasy Football Alarm Draft Guide. Now, you can go there. You can spend $27, or you can get it absolutely free with a monthly or annual subscription. So start your 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm All Pro and get immediate access to that draft guide. Go to fantasyalarm.com. That is fantasyalarm.com. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we get back, Dennis and I are going to be talking about some of this training camp news, and we're going to be talking about some of these underrated running backs. See you in a moment.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty fantasy football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a 1 season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim, Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better. Nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Oh, we are back. It is Thursday nights. Dynasty nerds. My man at Culture Coach Dennis Bennett is here. Dennis, how you doing, buddy?
Dude, I am doing so good. Thursday nights in Hilliard, they've got this in Old Hilliard. They've got this little shindig going on, and bands play. Well, tonight happened to be a band called New Frontiers, and they're a Journey cover band.
Ooh.
And dude, they were so good. If you hit my Twitter, I posted a clip of them. You know, if you're going to do Journey, you best not miss. And these dudes did not miss. This guy was so good. And I scored points with the wife for going when it's a bajillion degrees out. I had to weigh my options. Awesome. We got the Fantasy Football Expo coming up in a couple weeks. I'm going to be gone for the weekend. Had to weigh my options. Got to put in some time. Keep the home life happy.
You're a smart man. You're a smart man, Dennis Bennett. Yeah, we have concerts around here on Sunday nights in the park, and it wasn't a Journey band, but we did have a 80s tribute band a couple weeks ago, and they were surprisingly good. Like they did a pretty wide range of things, and I had to say I was pretty impressed. So I love summer concerts, you know, just hanging out in the lawn or, you know, whatever. It's a fun time, man.
Yeah, we're going to see Tesla next Tuesday. So
are you?
Hopefully the weather calms down. It's only like 80.
There you go. Well, Dennis, we got we got some things to talk about tonight, my man. There has been quite a bit of different news that has happened either right before training camp or during training camp. And then I know that we also just had an article come out from Dynasty Nerds talking about some of the underrated running backs that we should maybe take a look at. But let's start with all of the training camp news. Dennis, I think probably the biggest one potentially happened today with Joe Burrow. Now, I've been on the show, so I don't know if there's been any new updates, but what are we thinking as far as this Joe Burrow thing? And what would this mean for fantasy football managers if it is something serious?
Well, if it's something serious, it's going to be probably catastrophic because it's going to not only will it impact, obviously, the quarterback position, but it will impact T. Higgins and Jahmyr Chase, who are, a top 5 and a top 15 wide receiver.
Absolutely.
Irv Smith, the rebound, he's supposed to be coming back. I think he's just a zombie at this point. I got to be honest. As much as I liked him a couple of years ago, I think Irv's a zombie. But losing Joe Burrow is going to make an inefficient Joe Mixon less efficient.
Right.
And so, I've been kind of on Mixon a little bit. We talked a little bit about undervalued running backs. He's been falling. He was inefficient. He won the offseason because they didn't bring anybody in. And if they lose Joe Burrow, that's going to be, welcome to 3.8 yards a carry, Joe Mixon. However, what's been going around is they're saying it's a calf strain.
All right.
It seems all things seem to look good. We'll see. We'll probably wake up tomorrow and find out his calf was completely torn off and is still laying out on the practice field, flopping around. But, Burrow has that kind of Patrick Mahomes tough guy about him. He's pretty, but he's kind of,
for sure.
He's a go guy. He wants to, he's a guy you don't mind stepping into a dark alley with to get home. He'll take care of business.
Shiesty, baby.
Yep. He's come out there from Appalachia. He'll put it to the test. I think he's going to be fine. There'll be a lot of rest. Was actually just kind of looking to see. I'm not sure even who their backup is. Let's see. It is Trevor Siemian and Jake Browning. I gotta be honest. Yeah,
Like
stink
that.
face it is. Stink face it is.
Maybe they bring back Andy Dolphin.
Yeah, well, Bryce just got promoted to number 1. And Dalton had a decent year last year, so
You never know. You always love a good comeback story. All right, so hopefully we dodged a bullet in the fantasy community, and obviously as Bengal fans, they would have dodged a bullet as well. But some guy that is banged up again, Kadarius Toney. A big storyline from Chiefs camp is who's going to be that receiver that emerges. Juju Smith-Schuster's gone. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is gone. Is it going to be Kadarius Toney? Is it going to be Sky Moore? Is it going to be Rashee Rice? Like, how is this all going to play out? Dennis, what's your kind of read on this situation?
So I wanted to be in on Kadarius Toney so bad. You see him make some plays, and he's shifty, and he's fast, and he does things out there that you just can't teach. But I got to be honest, I'm out on Mr. Glass. If he pops off the wide receiver one season, that's fine. Somebody else got him. That's great. It ain't going to happen 2 years in a row. But then he's hurt again already. Now, part of my wanting to be in is Andy Reid's offense is very sophisticated, and Patrick Mahomes is quite the wheeler dealer. He plays it fast and loose sometimes, and you just have to get used to playing with a guy like that.
Sure.
So as high as we were on Sky Moore last year and disappointed that he didn't do more, he's going into year 2, and so I feel real good about that. Well, Kadarius Toney came over during the season, so he's had some time. He's played with them. He's had time to be in the offense. So that was another one of those things I'm going, well, really, I want a young wide receiver to be in year 2. Well, Tony's like year 1 and going into, he's been there a half a year, and so I'm like trying to sell myself on it. But he got injured. Like, I don't even know what the injury is anymore. It's just, if they tell me it's a hangnail, I'm like, he's out 4 to 6 weeks. Nothing surprises me with him. So I'm all about Sky Moore. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. Second year in the offense, working well with Mahomes, comfortable with what they're going to ask him to do, and he'll be able to improvise a little more as things go on. MVS on the outside is going to do what he does. He's big. He's going to run fast down the field. That's just what he does. He's going to catch some. He's going to not catch some. That's just what he does. Rashee Rice, like, he's a guy I'm going to play it like Sky Moore. Late in the season, when I see him start to get a little more playing time, but still struggling, that's when I'm going to go after him for next year in Dynasty. Next year, second year, and, Mahomes isn't going anywhere. Kelsey's going to be around a couple, 3, 4, 5 more years. Who knows how many more years? Who knows if at some point he's got to fall off. And when that happens, that offense is going to change somehow. You can't just plug and play a tight end into the Travis Kelce role. I get a little puzzled when people are like, oh, go get, Logan Thomas, Eric Bieniemy's in Washington. Yeah, you just don't plug and play you can't just put anybody in there and hope that happens. So Sky Moore is the guy. I want so bad to be in on Kadarius Toney, but like, he would literally have to be a throw-in on a deal.
Right. Yeah, no, he's the ultimate boom bust player. Like, he could boom, but the question is, like, how long will that boom even be for? Like,
6 quarters.
Exactly. So that's the tough part about a guy like that. An interesting development this season, and this has been more off the field, but this whole thing going on with the running backs. And now we have 2 of the younger up-and-coming type running backs in Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins that are now on the pup. And my first inclination was, man, how is Jonathan Taylor's ankle not cleaned up yet? And the more I thought about it, the more I read about it, I was like, his ankle's fine. He's mad. And right. J.K. Dobbins is in the same boat. Like, he's fine. He's just mad. So what are we doing with these running backs and this whole situation surrounding their compensation?
So I think they need to create a new list to put them on, the MUP, the mentally unable to perform list, because you're right. It's like, hey, I'm coming in, but I'm calling off. I feel emotionally strained. It's just something not sitting right with me. So I love Dobbins this year. I agree with you. I feel like he's ready to go. He wants security. He knows he plays the most fragile position in the NFL, and he's been injured. But when he played last year, when he came back, he didn't have the long speed, but he had everything else. His vision is phenomenal. And if they pass more, it's going to open up more. And I think he could be a top 8 back, top 5 back if that happens. It's not uncommon anymore the way they split the touches in the backfield. If you have a horse that gets the carries and gets up 280, 300 carries, they can get by with relatively little passing work. Dobbins, we've seen it in college, is a pretty good pass catcher.
Yeah.
The offense in Baltimore just doesn't do that much. We'll see with Monk and how it goes. But yeah, I agree with you. Like I'm not, if I'm in an underdog draft, I'm not hesitating taking Jonathan Taylor. If it's a one QB, 108, 109, if he slides to me in the second because I like the receiver there or something, great. I'm not hesitating with him. Third or fourth round, Dobbins. If I get Dobbins, if I go tight end, wide receiver, and get Dobbins in the fourth round, I'm all for it.
Yeah. No, I think we're in a similar boat here. Like, I'm not worried about it. I think both guys will be back. I think they will play. I don't see any sort of holdout situation happening here. I think both guys want to go out and prove that they deserve that next contract. The one that gets a little bit more iffy is we did get things cleared up with Barkley in a weird way. Not much more guaranteed money on that 1-year deal than what he got before, but it is what it is. But Josh Jacobs still isn't cleared up, and it sounds like he's left Vegas. So it doesn't seem like he believes it's going to get cleaned up anytime soon. At what point do we start hitting the panic button a little bit on Josh Jacobs?
I feel like Jacobs will be in at the end of camp.
So you don't think he misses any games?
I think I think he may miss week 1 just because he's getting ready. And it wouldn't surprise me if Josh McDaniels holds him out a week or 2 when he comes back as a punishment to kind of see, to get a look at the other guys and see, hey, let's see, if he really is gone.
Really need him?
Do we really need him? Because the truth of the matter is they should trade him because they need to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes
badly.
And, much like my dynasty teams that had the 101 and just didn't need Bijan Robinson this year, that's kind of where the Raiders are at with Josh Jacobs. It made absolutely no sense for them to franchise tag him. They should have just went in the rebuild, but Jimmy G looked into Josh Jacobs' eyes with that sparkle and wink. And, next thing they know, Josh is like, I think we can compete. Let's franchise tag him. I feel like Jacobs will be back. Did he leave Las Vegas? Maybe. Where's he going? California, where he's from? Okay. That's not very far away. It's a 40-minute flight to Vegas?
Sure.
No. When he gets ready to come back, Mark Davis will send the private plane. I like it. It's a tough situation for them. And I think Austin Eckler said something about, look, we have to approach it from a collective bargaining perspective, not just us as running backs. Yeah, the summit was cool and all. But when they go up for their next collective bargaining agreement as a league, they have to figure it out there. Yeah. Because it is interesting that, running backs that position has dropped in average annual pay when literally every other position, including long snapper, has went up. So I like that they're willing to fight for it, and they have to do something to get the attention. You know, if nobody knows what your plight is, there's not really a whole lot of help you're going to get. But you got to go. I'm not going to leave $10 million on the table. I'm just not. I saw what happened to Le'Veon Bell. I may skip camp, but when it's time to start doling out paychecks, I'm hopping in there and going to pick mine up. So it's going to be a long season for the Raiders, unfortunately. But I think it's hard to swallow because I've heard they offered him $12 million and he said no. And then Saquon goes back for an extra $900,000.
Right.
And, you know, he said he had an epiphany. You know, he just decided I would rather make $11 million and play football than not play football.
Right. Yeah, no, it's one that I'm definitely monitoring, and I'm with you. I don't think if he does miss games, I don't think it's going to be many. Hopefully he doesn't miss any games. Although all of my Jahmyr White shares would be okay with him, you know, missing some time.
Right.
And Jahmyr
we
White.
We got to find out about him sooner or later, right?
Right. Come on. But that being said, I think at some point he's going to come to the realization, like, look, I'm not holding the cards here. I'm not, you know, so I got to get out there. I gotta.
The one thing that I see him saying, you know, maybe I'll stay out a few weeks, is that the Raiders kind of suck, whereas the Giants made the playoffs last year and look to take another step this year. So it's a little, the situation surrounding Barkley is substantially better than the one surrounding Jacobs. But, you know, $10.1 million is a lot to leave on the table.
It is. It's a lot to leave on the table. One of the best news blips from camp was that my boy Javonte Williams did not start on the PUP. So we've got Taylor and Dobbins on the PUP, but Javonte is not on the PUP. And that surprised some people because with how devastating his knee injury was, there were a lot of people that thought it would be similar to Dobbins, that he was going to miss quite a bit of time. And look, is it still a possibility that he could miss time? It's not out of the realm of possibility, but all reports is he's there. He's looking fast. He's looking, you know, he looks more or less like his old self. Now, there are some guys that have done it. Not many, but we have seen Jamal Charles and Adrian Peterson come back from ACLs and not miss a beat. He is young enough to where maybe he is that kind of athlete. Maybe he's young enough and all of, you know, everything that he has attached down there, he's just bionic and he's going to come back and be an absolute stud. Where are you at with Javonte Williams? They showed him a little bit of confidence by not drafting a running back. They only really brought in Samaje Perine, which I don't think anybody's really worried about Samaje being like the guy at any point. He's a fine fill-in, but one of the most inefficient backs in football over the last couple of years, more of a receiving back for Cincinnati. So what are your thoughts on Javonte?
I love the situation he's in. You're right. He's young. I just was looking. He's a little bigger than I thought he was at 5'10", 220. I thought he was a little bit smaller, which I think, you know, that puts him kind of in the middle between, I think, Jamal Charles and Adrian Peterson in size. So there's nothing really there to tell me, well, he should be good or it's going to be rough for him to come back. You know, Sean Payton, I think, has a plan for that offense. You know, he's got a plan to slag Nathaniel Hackett that he's executing. That's for dang sure. But that offense in Denver, they've added some offensive linemen. They're putting in that offense. I don't think Russ is a bad quarterback. He historically starts slow, and last year it just usually it's 3 or 4 weeks. Last year it was 12 weeks. It's 13 weeks. You know, that happens. You know, you start a little slower when you get old. Trust me.
Sure.
And I like where Javonte's at. He's going into his third year now.
Yep.
He's he's going to want to start pushing to see if he can get an extension. To do that, he's going to have to get on the field. I think if he goes out and plays well, I think that Denver will try to keep him, in part because the running back market is what it is. And, while he's flashed, he's missed time. And so I think the only leverage he's going to have is to go on the pup next spring to be kind of, pull the J.K. Dobbins,
now my ACL injury's acting up. It didn't.
My knee's acting up a little bit. My bursitis. But I like Williams. I think he's set up. They've got a non-threatening, competent backup. He's not, like you said, P. Ryan is not exciting. He's not efficient. He's going to go in there and probably make sure Russ doesn't get his head taken off on third downs until Javonte proves he's back. But I think Javonte's set up to be a 3-down back and by the second half of the season, I think he'll be dominating the touches.
Absolutely. Well, Dennis, what are the training camp news, notes, tidbits that you've had your eye on that you find kind of interesting?
It's been – oops, I'm looking at the wrong page. One thing happened today that it's happened on the defensive side of the ball. Now, in IDP, you're not drafting cornerbacks. But when Jalen Ramsey got hurt, to me, that looks like an opportunity for the Dolphins to have to be a little more aggressive on offense. Ramsey's still a pretty good quarterback. Is he top in the game anymore? Not consistently, but he's pretty good. And so now if the other teams can kind of put up a little more points, that means that Tua and Hill and Waddle are going to have to perform better. It looks like Dalvin's going to New York, so that means it's Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. And honestly, Mostert's going first in drafts, but Wilson's the guy I'm grabbing. It looks like to me that Wilson is the starter and Mostert will be the other guy. Now, I don't know that either one of them can stay healthy, but I feel like Ramsey's injury is going to put that defense in a position to give up some points and make that offense be a little more effective.
No, that's a good one. I am interested in Devon A-Chain there too, to see like what kind of role he's going to end up getting in this offense this early on.
He's going to be in a tree making cookies with the rest of the elves.
Yeah, I think you mean Deuce Vaughn. I think that's who you mean.
Him too.
But no, it is a good one to keep an eye on, because I think that's more of like the game theory aspect of it, to where, yeah, we can talk about specific players, but when you look at what defenses are doing, that plays such a huge such a huge factor in how the offenses push the ball or don't push the ball. So no, I think that's a good one to keep an eye on for sure.
Now, I'm both puzzled by the Dalvin Cook to New York potential, and that makes perfect sense to me, because on one hand, it's like Bryce Hall is good. Like, if Bryce is healthy, I don't think Dalvin gets much of an opportunity. But I think we realize when Melvin Gordon is walking around wearing his Super Bowl ring from last year, he's showing off the ring. He's not really spouting any stats because there were none, but he still got the ring. And so I think Dalvin, while he's torn by that, in three directions. I want to make the money. I want to win. But I want to go where I feel valued. Yeah. So if Dalvin goes, I think by midseason, he may grumble because he's not being used, because Bryce will be back. Now, Bryce's knee, it's up in the air. There are some challenges now with Garrett Wilson having an ankle injury. Yeah. Is it going to be minor? I hope so, because on Underdog, I got a lot of Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, me too.
Of Garrett Wilson. Like he's my wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, and I'm still there with it, twisted ankle and all. But Dalvin Cook going there, I think, helps New York to put together a team that can push deep into the playoffs. Rodgers is going to be great. He's doing all the things. He took a massive pay cut
That's huge. Yeah.
You know, I'm surprised somebody in Green Bay hasn't put a hit out on him for it, to be honest, because he's like, why wouldn't you do that for us? But you go there with all these people you don't know, well, other than Randall and Allen, because you had them go with you. You know, if I'm David Bakhtiari, who's supposed to be one of his guys, I'm calling him up and I'm like, what the F, man? You know, you could have done that here and let us get, you know, more weapons too. But with Rodgers, if Cook signs there, they have a ton of weapons. Their defense is good. And as long as their offensive line comes together, you know, they drafted Elijah Vera Tucker last year. Hopefully Becton is back this year and he slides in at right tackle. I'm a little concerned that you know, it looks like they're still trying to slide. How old is Dwayne Brown now? 64 years old. Still trying to slide him in there somewhere on the offensive line. I mean, I think he's older than Jason Peters. And you know, we saw Peters didn't look great in Dallas the last couple of years. But I like the fit of Cook. I think he brings something to that offense. I don't think he brings anything that Bryce Hall doesn't have other than being a veteran. Bryce is going into his second year. There's a little bit of veteran there. But I think it would be it's a classic case of I'm going to go somewhere where I think the team can win. Maybe I'll take a little bit less and hope that Austin Eckler doesn't call me and be like, hey, man, why are you taking less money? That's really the big one for me.
Yeah, no, I think Dalvin Cook, that whole situation is fascinating. But I think you're right. I think a lot of this has to do, we always want to think in fantasy terms because we're playing fantasy football. That's what we care about. But realistically, the Jets are like, if we have two running backs, okay, that's good. Like, what happens if Bryce isn't fully healthy? Or what happens if he goes down again? Like, we'd like to have another running back that we can really count on because we think we're a championship caliber team. And I think that's tough. Like, selfishly, I don't want Dalvin Cook to go there. I want him to go to the Bills because I don't have anybody on the Bills. I don't have James Cook. I don't have Damian Harris. So go to the Bills. Or, you know, I want him to go to the Houston Texans. Or, you know, like I want him to go somewhere where it's not going to affect the fantasy players that I care about. Well, it doesn't always work out that way. So I think that is the case. And once you see Aaron Rodgers willing to take a pay cut, it just lends itself to the fact that, yeah, they're probably bringing in Dalvin Cook. And shoot, maybe they still are in the market to make a trade for some big name player. They didn't seem to be in on DeAndre Hopkins, but, you know, is there another player out there where maybe if things go a certain way, maybe they make a trade or maybe they, sign somebody out of the blue that's still available. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I do think that the Dalvin Cook thing to New York, as much as it doesn't make sense for fantasy, it does make sense for real football. Sedated Fork said, I did see a couple of clips of JSN. Kid's looking fast to me. Seahawks were awful at screens last year, but they've been putting JSN in the slot and trying wide receiver screens. Should be interesting. And I did want to touch on this as well. Mike H. asked, would we trade a 24 late first in a 1 QB league for Javonte Williams? I don't know about you, Dennis, but that's like a smash. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like that's one where you're like, hold on.
Yeah.
Really? Is that what I'm seeing?
Just 1 first and it's late in a 1 QB league. So that late first isn't even as valuable as it is in a super flex league. Done and done. Like, give me Javonte all day.
So who I'm trying to think in my 1 QB league I was in, who might, am I going to trade Zay Flowers for Javonte Williams? Am I going to trade Michael Mayer for Javonte Williams? Tank Bigsby for Javonte Williams.
Jonathan Mayo or Mingo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sign
Javonte.
me up.
All day long. All right, Dennis. Any other camp news you want to get to before we start talking about some of these running backs?
The last thing that of note for me was Jimmy G's foot. He's cleared, it seems. He's ready to go in camp, says everything's great. Because I feel like if it doesn't work out, talking about fantasy zombies, keep an eye out for Carson Wentz. I know they got Brian Hoyer, but I feel like Wentz is going to land somewhere. I mean, if Josh Rosen bounced around the league as long as he did, Carson Wentz still has a good couple years of rostership in him.
Absolutely. No, I could see a few teams potentially still rostering him, and I think that's exactly what he's waiting to do. He's like, I don't want to go somewhere and be a backup. Let's wait and see if there's any major injuries. Let's wait and see how things play out. And I'm going to try to resurrect my career with a team that's desperate for a quarterback, because it happens. Now, not every year, but then you have some years where there's multiple quarterbacks that go down. I remember a few years ago, Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger, and like there was one other guy that like all went down in the first like 3 weeks of the season. You're like, holy cow, there's like a quarterback epidemic happening right now. So there absolutely could be something that happens, week 1, week 2, maybe even in preseason, to where the top guy tears his ACL, whatever, and we're looking at Carson Wentz as the starting quarterback. So no, I think that's a good call there. All right, Dennis, tell us about this article that you had. You told me that there was an article that came out this week, top 5 underrated running backs to look at for Dynasty. What are without spoiling the whole article, or maybe we could, what are some of the names on here?
Well, we can touch on a couple, that way they can still go to the site and find it. Probably the biggest one is Tony Pollard. I'm trying to, let's see where I popped up. He's the biggest name. I lost my, here it is. I lost my ADP. Tony Pollard is it still feels like they're, are the Cowboys really going to roll in there with Malik Davis and Rico Dowdle behind him? Is that going to be what they do? Now, Jerry does some crazy shit, but that just doesn't feel right. And so Pollard, he's RB14 right now. At the time this article published, he was RB15. So he's crept up a little bit in startup ADP. Last year he finished his RB7, and he looked explosive. I know he's coming off a foot injury, but by all reports, he's healthy. He's just 26 years old. And while he's had a few years in the league, because of Zeke, he hasn't had a lot of run.
Sure.
A lot of times I'm talking about like, who's going to be the next Michael Turner? He sat behind LaDainian Tomlinson for 4 years. Yeah, he got a little bit of run. Tomlinson put up great fantasy numbers. Zeke put up great fantasy numbers. The big difference here, Zeke got shipped out. They didn't re-sign him after he became a free agent. Turner ended up going to Atlanta and having a nice fantasy career for about 5 or 6 years. Pollard is
very much so the same story.
Yeah. The big difference, they were both about 225 pounds. It's just Michael Turner is 5'10" and Pollard is 6 foot. Now, I think Pollard's a little more explosive. Maybe it was a different time back then, and I don't think Turner was necessarily relied upon as a pass catcher. But we saw last year there were games where, Zeke had 18 carries. Pollard had, 9 carries, but caught 6 passes and put 2 of them in the end zone. He's a dynamic playmaker that I think is going to really pay off. If, talk about trading a late first for somebody, I don't know that you could get Pollard for a late first. I think a lot more people are on him. But in a startup, as RB14 at 26 years old, you're thinking in a 3-year window. I think that because of the lack of usage over the first 4 years of his career, Pollard is a great value to me there.
How worried are you? Because you mentioned it in the beginning there. How worried are you about, Zeke coming back there, or them signing Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette or, somebody like that? Like, how worried are you that they do still add another running back that'll put Pollard back in a similar position he was in before?
I think that I honestly think they do sign somebody. I think we've seen with Zeke that, for him to go back, maybe he's at that Eddie George stage of his career. He's been in the league. This is his 8th year now.
I think so. Yeah.
He's still powerful, but he's lost what wiggle he did have. He doesn't have the burst that he used to have. He's a plotter now. You need a yard, he'll get you a yard. You need 3 yards, he'll get you a yard. I love Zeke, huge Ohio State fan, but the writing is on the wall. We see it, and this is why the contracts are so difficult for running backs, because at 8 years into the league, while he may still get a deal, a minimum money deal, I don't think he's as explosive as Latavius Murray at this point. And Murray is really, he's a guy that's bouncing around as the last running back that doesn't play special teams on a team, just holding on to be the guy as a professional RB. I think if Zeke's going to keep playing, that's what he's going to be. So if he goes back, will he get more usage there than, say, if he went and backed up somebody else? Probably a little bit, because he's familiar with the offense.
The system, yeah.
New OC, but I think by and large, it's Mike McCarthy. I'd be a little more concerned, I think, about Leonard Fournette, but not a lot. I think Leonard might get a little more goal line work. But we've seen Pollard doesn't need a lot of goal line work to score a lot of touchdowns. Would it be nice? Sure. If he starts getting goal line carries at, he's 225 pounds, he'll be able to pop him in there.
Is Pollard really 225? I did not realize he weighed that much.
I think he's pretty big. I can pull it up and see, but
and maybe that's just a misconception that I had because of his speed, but I always had Pollard as more of this 205, 210 type of running back.
And maybe I'm wrong, but let me see.
I don't know. You absolutely could be right. I might have a misconception on that. And honestly, if he was 225, that slightly gives him a bump in my rankings. Not that he needed it, because he has shown past couple years that, and even if Zeke comes back, I still think Pollard, it's his role now. He's the lead back.
He's listed at 209 on our lad, so I was a little heavy on him. So
okay, all right.
6 years, 4 or 5 years into the league, I'm going to give him 212.
There you go.
He's putting on some grown man weight now.
I like it. No, but I like Pollard this year. I do. I think he's going to have an RB1 season again. And even if they do bring Zeke, even if they do bring somebody, it's not going to be what it was before, where it's, mostly Zeke and then a little bit of Pollard, and then it's 50-50. It's going to be mostly Pollard and a little bit of whoever else joins the show. Now, give me somebody on this in this article that might be a little more under the radar than a big name like Tony Pollard.
We'll go a lot under the radar.
Ooh, I like it.
So I know your boy Cole Kmet just signed a fat contract.
Yeah,
congrats to him. I'm not in on him.
Oh, come on, Dennis.
I just don't think he's that good. There's other guys in that, it's giant second tier I like better. But I do love Khalil Herbert.
You do. I remember you talking about him a couple weeks ago.
5'9", 209, explosive. Needs some work in the passing game. There's definitely an opportunity for him to expand a role there. But he just has the explosiveness. I mean, he broke off a 74-yarder last year. He had a couple other runs. And as this offense matures, are we sold on Luke Getsy and Matt Eberflus yet? I think the jury is still out.
True.
But I think they're starting to put together some weapons around Justin Fields. We can't have Justin Fields running like he did. But Fields also has to get rid of the ball when he's passing. Fields' biggest Achilles heel is that he thinks he can make a play. So he's going to, nobody's open. I'm still going to try to make a play. Sometimes you got to toss it away and live to fight another day. But I feel like, to me, I think Herbert, he had 731 yards rushing last year, 5.7 yards a carry. I think he's going to win the job coming out of camp. Does that mean Deontay Foreman gets cut? I don't know. It doesn't feel like they signed Foreman for that much money. And honestly, I would rather have Foreman as my backup than Tristan Ebner. I think Travis Homer is going to get some passing down work. But it'll be Homer and Roschon Johnson kind of battling for that. I like Herbert a lot. I think he has the juice that the other guys don't. And I think you need that on a team like the Bears, who are trying to be competitive. I love Darnell Mooney if he can stay healthy, he gives the Bears a downfield threat that they didn't have last year. I think they hoped that Chase Claypool would bring that, and he didn't.
Right.
And he's kind of got a lot of stuff going on right now. And so I just kind of feel like Claypool's out there. DJ Moore, he's an intermediate guy. He can do some short stuff and he can do the occasional deep stuff, but he's really an intermediate guy. And then Cole Kmet,
that's all we need to say.
I give you a hard time about it. I think he's going to have a good year. But the reality is the Bears are still going to be a heavy run team.
Sure.
And I think Khalil Herbert is going to be a big part of that.
I'm torn on this one, Dennis, because I'm with you in the sense of I don't think Khalil Herbert's a bad player at all. I think he's a very exciting, explosive player. The thing I worry about is, man, they brought in a lot of running backs if they believe in him. Like if he's your guy, you don't normally bring in that many running backs in an offseason. So that's my biggest concern.
Well, he's got to fight for it. Don't get me wrong. He's got to fight for it.
Yeah. We'll see. Anytime it's coaches that didn't draft you, and I don't know, man. I'm torn. I think he's a good player, but I think long term, I think they want Roschon to be the guy. But we'll see how it all plays out. We don't have enough time to get deep into one, but quickly give me like one more name and just a point or two as to why they're there.
So it seems to be obvious, but it's DeAndre Swift. And I think he's going to be he's going to get an opportunity. They want him, hometown boy. They want him to do well. I love Rashad Penny. I don't think he can stay healthy. I think Swift is going to he's better than Kenneth Gainwell. I think Swift will be the guy who gets the most opportunity in Philly, but they're going to spread it around a lot anyways.
Yeah, it is. It's an exciting backfield, but yeah, it's not the most reliably healthy backfield. That's for sure. So if by week 12, all of a sudden Kenneth Gainwell is the last man standing, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise ever. But I'm with you. I like DeAndre Swift quite a bit. And
Swift he's going to be out to prove the I'm soft people wrong.
Exactly. I'm with you. All right, Dennis, that about wraps things up for us. Tell the folks where they can find you and what you're working on.
You can find me right here, right now, every Thursday night, 10:15. Actually, I'm leading the show next week. You're on vacation. Right. So I'll be in here at 9:00, Mondays and Fridays on the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, and in the Discord Tuesdays at 9.
Absolutely. And if you want to get to see Dennis Bennett and myself in person, Fantasy Expo's coming in a couple weeks, Canton, Ohio. You can see us there. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Price. Like you mentioned, I might be gone next week, but I will be back just like the Terminator. For Tyler, for Dennis, for myself, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for the interaction, and we'll see you guys next week.